When it comes to working out and training for sports, there are several different methods and ways to go about it, with the ultimate goal being to improve our overall athletic output and performance. Some examples of training include resistance training, which is primarily our weight training, HIIT or high intensity interval training, which is made up of short bursts of intense exercises that primarily target muscles for endurance, and finally flexibility and mobility training that is used for stretching and increasing range of motion through certain movements. However, most athletes are undereducated or improperly educated on training and working out. Today, with the heavy presence of social media and the near limitless viewing of fitness influencers on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, we have access to a vast amount of information, and it is essential to remember that not all advice is created equal and should be looked at with a critical eye. Athletes should seek out qualified and reputable sources of fitness and training while also remembering to prioritize their overall health and well-being over their performance and physical appearance. Doing bench press, deadlifts, and squats is all well and good, but without the basic understanding of when to implement these exercises and the volume and intensity needed to meet your desired goals, these exercises become less effective. It is important that we have a good and basic understanding of types of training, phases of training, and how to utilize them properly in order to avoid injury, overtraining, or even undertraining. Each phase of training incorporates a different intensity and volume load, and although each phase is not the same, they act as building blocks for one another to maximize athletic performance and output in order to achieve our desired goals for the upcoming season. How's it going, everyone? Hope you're doing well today. My name is Jamie, and I'm a licensed athletic trainer. Today, we're going to be focusing on weight training in the off-season for athletes. Everyone is training for different things, and we need to remember as athletes that our purpose in the weight room is to incorporate exercises in athletic positions that will translate to our athletic output and performance on the field. How can our exercise position be transmittable to our sport, position, or sport-specific movements? And these are some of the questions that you need to be asking yourself when planning a workout in the weight room. This video is going to help create a good foundation for your next weight training program in the off-season. So without further ado, let's get started. Before we break down the different phases of training and how we can implement them, I think it's important that we have a basic physiological understanding of what a muscle is and how it functions. Muscles are made up of muscle fibers, and these are constructed like rod-like structures called myofibrils. A myofibril is then broken down even further into a sarcomere, which is a contractile unit containing the proteins of actin and myosin. This is where muscle contraction and relaxation occurs. For a muscle contraction to occur, a motor neuron will carry a signal from the central nervous system to the muscle fiber. That signal will then create an action potential, and from that action potential, the myosin heads will be allowed to bind with the actin, forming a cross bridge or a cross section that pulls the actin, causing them to slide over the myosin, thus producing a muscle contraction. It's a bit more complex than that, but I wanted you to have a general idea of how muscles contract and relax. There's a couple different approaches that you can take with your off-season weight training, which are typically broken down into a linear or non-linear periodization. Periodization is a calculated and structured-like adjustments of training variables such as weight, rep range, intensity, and volume. This is to optimize and increase overall fitness adaptations and decrease the likelihood of overtraining and injury. Periodization allows for a more strategic approach to training and takes into account the body's physiological response to exercises and helps optimize performance over time. Within each of those periodization models, it's typically broken down into 4 different phases: hypertrophy, strength, power, and endurance. Hypertrophy, by definition, means an increased size of an organ or tissue. So when we refer to hypertrophy training, we're training to get our muscles bigger, and this is due to the increased size of the cells in the muscle. Hypertrophy in the muscle follows the progressive overload principle, which is a gradual increase of weight, repetition, intensity, and volume during an exercise. With progressive overload, this allows the muscle tissue to accommodate their cellular structure and composition in order to meet the imposed demands of weight training and therefore grow. As a result, we see an increase in the size of actual muscle fibers, myofibrils, and more capillaries in the muscle. Hypertrophy trainings are a typical set rep range of 3 to 4 sets with about 8 to 12 reps, with the intensity being anywhere from about 40 to 80% of your 1 rep max. Strength is typically defined as the maximum amount of force by a muscle or muscle group, and the best example of this is during a 1 rep max. The training of muscle for strength focuses on developing a greater cross-sectional area in the muscle and the muscle's ability to exert maximum force on an external resistance. So when it comes to strength training, we would decrease our volume, which is our reps, while increasing our intensity, which is our sets and weight. Our set rep range would look more of 5 to 6 sets with about 4 to 6 reps, with a good rest time in between each set. Power is simply the product of force and speed, how fast you can move a weight and produce a sub-maximum force at about 30% of your 1 rep max. Our set rep range will look anywhere from 3 to 4 sets of about 6 to 8 reps, with again, a nice long rest in between each set. And then finally, we have endurance. Endurance training is a bit peculiar, and I'll explain why. Endurance training leads to the adaptations in both cardiovascular and musculoskeletal systems. This supports the overall improvement in exercise endurance and performance. Sole strength in endurance training, however, is rare. Concurrent exercise is the term for the majority of exercises that combine strength and endurance. Additionally, recent research shows that short-term high-intensity exercises like weightlifting or sprinting can lead to endurance adaptations, while low-intensity exercises that approach failure can lead to strength adaptations. The reason why periodization for your off-season training is so vital is because after a couple weeks, you begin to experience muscle stagnation, which is continuing to perform the same exercises at the same rate, at the same weight, at the same intensity. For example, a squat. At the beginning, squatting a certain weight will seem heavy and challenging, but over the course of the next couple of weeks, if you continue to squat at the same weight and at the same intensity, your body will make those strength and hypertrophy adaptations. And once those adaptations are achieved, then the muscle doesn't need to exert as much force as it once did with the same weight, and therefore becomes stagnant, which is why periodization is so vital to muscle growth and performance. Stagnation isn't always a bad thing though. Having stagnation while you're in season can be good, because while we're in season, we're not focusing on hypertrophy or strength gains, but rather maintaining strength and size that we achieved during our off-season training. In a study done in 2011, researchers studied professional soccer players that went through the same 10-week off-season training program for the upcoming season. They were then divided into two separate groups, with Group 1 performing one strength maintenance workout every week for 12 weeks, while Group 2 would perform one strength maintenance workout every other week for 12 weeks. The results showed that Group 1, while doing one strength maintenance workout a week, allowed them to maintain their strength, sprint, and jump performance achieved during their 10-week off-season training, while Group 2, on the other hand, while doing one strength maintenance workout every other week, demonstrated reduced leg strength and 40-meter sprint performance. Linear periodization is your typical and more traditional approach towards weight training. Linear periodization will typically begin with high volume, low intensity training, and then progress and shift towards more low volume, high intensity training as we approach our upcoming season. With linear periodization, the different training phases of hypertrophy, strength, power, and endurance typically last anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. But obviously, this can be adjusted depending on the volume of training frequency you do and how much time you have in between your seasons. The goal of many linear periodization programs is to peak or maximize strength and power gains going into the beginning of our season towards the end of our off season. Nonlinear periodization is a bit more flexible and dynamic when it comes to scheduling and planning, but still incorporates those 4 different phases of hypertrophy, strength, power, and endurance. A nonlinear approach to weight training in the off season would be more like block days of the week targeting phases of our periodization. For example, on Monday, a squat exercise might be performed at 90% of our 1 rep max for 3 sets of 5 reps with 5 minutes of rest in between each set. Then on Wednesday, being a high velocity power day, jump squats may be used at 30% of a 1 rep max for 6 sets of 6 reps with 3 minutes of rest in between each set. Then on Friday, to develop local muscular endurance and unload high threshold motor units and their associated muscle fibers, we might use squats at 50% of our 1 rep max for 1 set of 25 reps. This is just an example of a nonlinear periodization workout program. Studies when comparing the two approaches indicate that nonlinear periodization is at least as effective as linear periodization for maximal strength gains, but more research is still needed to be done. Ultimately, when deciding between a linear and nonlinear periodization off-season training program, it comes down to what best fits you and your schedule. While training in the gym is beneficial for our strength and athleticism, we still need to be on the field performing our sport-specific exercises and movements. Training for athletes and maximizing athletic output is always changing and evolving. There's decades of research and information out there, and it can be a bit overwhelming sometimes. Whichever way you approach your off-season weight training program, remember to do what's best for you, your schedule, and to train smart. As always, all the sources in the description below if you want to do further research yourself. Thank you all for watching this video, and until next time, I'll see you then.